T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey, my friends, welcome. It's the Launch Sequence Podcast, and it is not the first one after CitizenCon. If you missed last week, that was our immediate impressions, but this is one when we've gotten to digest some stuff. We've gotten to really soak it in, breathe it in, and we're not just talking about Star Citizen today. We finally can talk about Squadron 42. And with me, good friend, fellow Star Citizen content creator, but also dipping into a lot of other games that I like a lot, LevelCapGaming. Welcome, my friend. How are you doing?
Hello. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. And I like the way you summarized digesting it all, because I think I'm just finally at a place where like my nerves are actually calming down a little, whereas just information overload, everything you wanted to hear for so many years, like all happening at once. And then you're like, I need to just like relax. I need to center myself. I need to like figure out what this all means in the greater space, you know?
Yeah, no kidding. This is going to be a fun episode. We have a lot to go over. Like LevelCap said, so many things that we have been wanting to hear for a while. One of the biggest things about this show I just want to come out and say right now is the difference between what they kind of tried to tell us was a game before, you know, and what they do now. Because from my perspective, it's not like they magically got better at editing videos. They have something tangible that's better than what we've always seen before, and it feels like it's actually being played because we're seeing some of that stuff show up in these patches. Like that whole just all-encompassing feel of like, this looks like a real game. Some of it's coming now. There's a clear roadmap for a lot of this stuff, and clearly a lot of it's in development. I think was a really powerful combination for CitizenCon compared to the last ones. But how many CitizenCons have you seen?
I think I've seen most of them, maybe not all of the early ones live, but I've definitely gone back and watched them like maybe a week after they came out when it wasn't super popping off, you know?
Okay.
It was like one of the more boring years. But yeah, I've seen most of the fan con event stuff, you know, aside from some of the stuff that happens overseas or something that's like sort of for different audiences. But I'll see the little clips from it and the translations, you know, where it's like if anything big happened and whatnot. But
so you're following it pretty closely. Like you're keeping up with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I know everything about the game because I just made a video where I was like talking about cargo stuff and people are like, didn't they say cargo works like this, you know? And it's like information from 2014, 2015. I'm like, I don't remember that stuff. It's too long ago. But anything, the past couple of years, I'm definitely very honed in on. And before that, kind of more lightly honed in on. Like, I know this stuff, but because it wasn't coming to a theater near you anytime soon, I was less obsessed with it, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
Peripherally. Yeah.
Now the full obsession.
Yeah, for the past couple of years, I'd say.
One of us. All right, so considering what you have seen before, why don't we just start out with kind of, because we're going to dive deep into the details, why don't we start out with like a general summary of what you thought of the event overall, especially considering the context of the past ones?
Yeah, I mean, considering the context of the past ones, this is the best by far. I don't think you can really make an argument against it. 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 would be my rating. Like it's up there. It was solid. A lot of really important information. The stuff that I didn't get to see that I might have wanted to see is excusable because it was still like 12 hours of info. And you're like, I mean, they gotta pick and choose at some point, right? They can't just tell you about every single system in the game. They got to spend 30 minutes on hair, you know, or whatever. But
well, so were there any things that you felt maybe could have been replaced with something more important?
Not so much replaced, but definitely some pacing stuff in some of the presentations, like the galaxy map or the system map was very cool. Probably one of the most important bits of info. But that chugged, man. They're really building up to the like zoom out to see the whole system thing.
Yeah.
Which was very obvious that it was coming, and it wasn't like, it was cool, but it wasn't like this mind blowing realization that I think they thought it was going to be. And it was just like this long, slow lead up. But at the same time, I don't mind seeing the devs demo their tech. It's got a different personality and feel to it versus them just showing us endless pre-recorded videos the whole time. So
hmm
it can be fun, and we get some good memes out of it too. Bone has become
Press
the
T-Bone.
local hero.
Oh my gosh, that we're gonna make that a soundbite on. I mean, it's got to be on the Discord. It's got to be in our stream.
Yeah.
It's Bone will live on. He's, I guess, the new Glenn. You remember Chris constantly yelling at Glenn because he'd be flying or doing something and he crashes or goes the wrong direction or doesn't turn. And Glenn.
Yeah. I think the Tonk guy is just glad that people aren't focused on him anymore.
It's, it'll come around.
They should team them all up together and do some sort of like live gameplay session with them.
I do agree with you about the map part. I think the thing that was a bummer was that, like, they did the zoom out at the end, like you said, and it was supposed to be a big thing. But by that point, we were already at the scale that the star map already is. So
Yeah.
it, like, the impressive part of the mail is the map is that it goes from like really small all the way out. But we didn't see that first time. They were at the planetary scale, and then they were like, let's just scroll back all the way. And
Yeah.
like, okay,
and
cool.
I thought the coolest feature was something that you almost had to like notice off to the side. They didn't really highlight it as much. Was that when I think they got on board the Carrack, you see the Carrack map and the city map integrated together. So you can see the path going from the
Yeah.
city onto the Carrack. I was like, that's the coolest thing right there. Show that. That's like your number one feature. That's super cool.
It is,
And it
yeah.
was just sort of like a background thing that they almost didn't mention. But I mean, we caught it. We're laser focused on all the little details. The pathing stuff was incredible. The tech behind it was really impressive because I was trying to communicate it in my summary video where it's like, yeah, this looks like any old mini map you might see in a video game, right? But
Mhm.
when you understand that it's like dynamic around like an entire solar system, like they couldn't go in and handcraft a mini map for a planet. Like it's just got to figure it out. Like that's the cool part of it. It's really impressive.
Yeah, that was when they showed that last year, and they kind of talked about how these aren't necessarily a separate asset. It's just we took the asset, scaled it down, and kind of wireframed it. And you can think about how cool the applications for something like that would be when it's always changing. And like you said, one thing I am curious about though is how they showed on the map the doors opening and closing.
Yeah.
You think that would kind of be a problem for PvP gameplay when you can see when somebody might be going through a door?
If you own the ship, I kind of like the idea of you being able to see your own ship's doors opening and closing. But maybe if you go onto a ship that isn't yours, maybe that information is limited to just the room that you're in or something, right?
That's fair. What
Like,
if you're
why
like in a
would
space station?
Maybe the space station's transmitting that information to you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a friendly station, then maybe it transmits it. If you're in a hostile station, then maybe you only have a very close proximity of information.
The idea of like sort of,
or you hack it, right? Maybe there's some hacking gameplay opportunities there where you hack into the map node and now you can see the doors and the other intel from the map, right? I'm sure they're planning. They kind of talked about gathering map data, right? You could download it and stuff. So I imagine some of that will be built into hacking the map data. And then when you hack the map data, does that just mean you get the locations of everything, or do you get a live feed of everything? Like maybe there's different levels to it.
Yeah, that more details there would be fun, because I was just thinking that could offer a lot of combat step ups on other people. I want to get to the mapping and buying map stuff, but I'm in my head, I'm playing this panel out. So I'm thinking, okay, we're still at Orison. I really wanted to pick your brain about a lot of the FPS stuff at CitizenCon. And one of the first things we started to encounter that they showed us was both the HUD, right? The new HUD, and the new scanning and radar mechanics. You are, I know you as a Battlefield person. That's why I watched your videos at first. So I think of you as a really great person to go to learn more about how FPS can be improved. What are your thoughts on those two mechanics?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be cognizant of Star Citizen trying to be a game for everyone. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach shooter games because the FPS genre is massive, right? You've got Fortnite and Call of Duty on the more kind of like casual, goofy side. And then you got Arma on the hardcore mil simi side, and then maybe Battlefield somewhere in between. And those can be very different audiences in terms of what they want. So I'm trying to look at Star Citizen and figure out what exactly they're going for. And it does seem to be somewhere around the Battlefield range of like accessible but serious, which I think is a good balance for the most part. In terms of what they showed there, all the upgrades looked extremely promising, and I was excited about it. Still, there was a lot of clunky movement mechanics built into it, and so it's hard to know when the animations are going to get refined a little bit more. Just some of the movement wasn't as smooth as I think some of the games that have been around for a lot longer and have had a lot longer to refine their movement systems and stuff like that.
Any
Yeah.
particular suggestions that you'd tell somebody like look out for if you wanted to give an example that you can think of?
The sliding. They changed some sliding together pretty quickly, which one looks unrealistic, and two, as soon as you can start sliding that much, that becomes the cheesy meta to do.
You can slide pretty far. I was thinking some Titanfall gameplay coming up.
Yeah. Well, and the character didn't have to reach full speed again, or like they just started running immediately and then slid again, right? Whereas
Right.
in real life, if you're gonna slide in a home base, right, or slide in a home plate, it's like you got to get full speed before you can even get a little distance, you know. So just tuning in the sliding a little bit more than that. I have my concerns about scanning. It seems like it was in a very early phase, so it's hard to give it too much feedback, but they kept saying that NPCs would recognize you when you did a big ping and spotted everybody, but they never did during the demonstration. And the scanning was like, it wasn't just a ping on like, hey, there's some guys over in this area, go see if they're over there, or here's a marker where they're going to be generally. It was like, here's a full on wall hack of everything they're doing and moving around. And then the player kept repeatedly scanning and scanning and scanning as needed. I'm like, this seems like a very powerful ability that would not only, in my opinion, detract from some of the gameplay in single player where you're simply not going to get surprised by guys hiding around corners and stuff because you're going to be scanning all the time, but also if that migrates in any way to multiplayer, it's gonna really hurt a lot of the fun stuff that you can do with just kind of concealment, crouching, being stealthy, trying to hide, trying to camp, anything like. If people can just scan you out of a location, I think they need to dial that in a bit more, in my opinion, and maybe either remove some of the wall hack elements or like make it more like a ping. Like here's a quick ghost or a shadow, like a sonar pulse on an enemy, as opposed to I scan them, now I can watch them walk around and change directions for like 10, 15 seconds.
So like maybe if they're occluded by something visually, they're also just kind of a cloud shape, but if you could see them directly, then it does highlight their whole body like they show.
Yeah, or like instead of giving me consistent feedback on their motion and their direction changes, maybe it's just a snapshot of where they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a little more fair, and it feels more realistic, because why would you be able to change? Why would you
See
be able
all
to
of their
detect
movement.
all that stuff unless you just have some sort of crazy, endless X-ray ability that your suit provides? You know, it feels a bit overpowered.
Yeah. I guess what they were showing would be like something if it was more like a directed scanning function where you're like holding something up and like shooting a signal at them continuously. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I was worried that would kind of, because I mean, so much of what what makes a single player FPS fun is going into an environment, not knowing what you're going to come up against, sort of scanning, scouting, figure it out, but making like line of sight eye contact with your targets, planning out your mission accordingly, and then like going in. But if you can just sort of scan stuff and be like, oh, he's crashed behind that box over there, let's go kill that guy. Like, I think that might rob the game over of some of the fun that can be had, you know?
That's fair.
Yeah.
So about the mapping stuff, back to that. What do you think of the whole go to a place, download the map, maybe you have to buy it or you can sell it at some point. This idea of like maps being a commodity and not just like a utility that's always on your screen. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's fine. I think there's a lot of fun gameplay opportunities that you can inject there. And I love that it also saves your map data as you explore. So if you don't buy the map, you're like, well, I've already explored this whole area. Now I kind of have that map information downloaded as well. I'm down for it. I've liked it in other games too, because it's always that exciting moment where you're like, oh, I got the map. Now I can see if there was any areas I missed back when I was exploring this area over here. That seems like it'll only be usable or mostly be usable in specific like compounds or bases or regions, as opposed to you going to a planet and being like, here's the planet of the whole map. Like, have fun exploring these 500 caves. It seems like
Yeah.
that's less realistic,
Yeah.
unless maybe you could sell that data. I don't know. I don't know what the scope of what they're planning is.
Yeah, so that's kind of the fun part of it, is like, what's the scope? Because maybe it is all in regions, but like, what if you meet a player who's got every region from a planet? You can just download
Yeah.
all those regions, and suddenly you have every cave on the planet, and that would be like an expensive piece of data to buy. So I do wonder how publicly available maps would be. Like, if obviously for a city, they're gonna just hand it out to you, but like for the nearby moon, could you just go and start grabbing maps for that, or how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point, because you don't want somebody selling the entire map to the moon, because that kind of steals some of the excitement from exploration. And if it makes the gameplay easier, more accessible, more profitable, players are going to do it, right? Regardless of whether or not it detracts from that discover gameplay element that's fun. So they gotta figure it out. Maybe they could limit map sizes that you could sell. Like, here's a map of like I don't know, 100 square kilometers. Maybe that's too big. Maybe it's too small. I don't know.
Maybe.
But
I don't know, man. I feel like, gamers are going to find a way to figure out how to sell that whole map. It seems
yeah,
like they're going to need to focus on creating a lot of, I guess planets would be hard. A lot of like content in space that's constantly changing out. Resource dumps and like old pirate derelicts and stuff. Because if somebody's eventually going to map a whole moon out.
yeah.
So they
Did
need
they?
to.
I missed the part where they actually said you could sell maps. I saw the part where they said you could sell locations and waypoints.
Um,
Did they say maps also? Because I know you could get them at terminals, but I
I'm.
assume
I mean,
that would be not player run
I'm
terminals.
not gonna say that they for sure said you could sell maps. So yeah, it might just be data points.
Okay.
So you can just download maps. Data points would be easier. Yeah, I can't remember the exact words. Part of the problem with doing it live, but
The more we talk about it, the more I think that selling maps would be a bad idea. Player sold maps would be a bad idea versus them just being like, okay, if you want to get a whole map to this specific region, we'll have that downloadable at a certain terminal. And that way they can limit how much players can just get a full map to a region versus having to
yeah,
explore it on your own.
yeah,
But I do love the idea of being able to sell locations and data points and being like, here's a giant asteroid field with super rare quantanium.
yes,
There's like
yeah,
10 points of quantanium here. It's worth 1 million, 3 million, 10 million, whatever. I'll sell you the location for like 50K or
yeah.
whatever.
And
Yeah.
that's what exploration's always meant to be. I mean, a lot of people think it's going to be like this huge science space opera sort of thing, and maybe it is. Maybe you're the lucky person who gets to explore a jump point or something. But like looking for resources is pretty rewarding, I think, and I think that's where their bread and butter of that kind of profession is going to end up being.
Yeah, well, it's ultimately going to be economically driven or progression driven, right? So you're like, I need to explore because I want to find things that are either going to benefit me financially, or I'm going to find really cool things that will make my character look cooler, like new gear, new ore that maybe we can mine and refine into some gear that I didn't have before. So
Yeah,
I like it all tying into that. I mean, obviously, exploring for the fun of it is also fun. But usually, what makes exploration fun in other games is because you find that secret treasure cave, right? And then you're like, oh man, we are just wandering around. We found this cave and it had this, and that in it. And that's what made that event specifically cool, as opposed to, yeah, we wandered around and saw trees. And, like that's not as cool of a story.
yeah, yeah. And so yeah, it's like when you're exploring, you're either going to have a lot of fun, but you kind of got to make money. And so you just think about what do you need to do to make money. That's probably what you're going to be doing exploring.
hmm
You ever considered taking that game style?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cargo running is one of the like bigger things that I'm interested in. I'm not just interested in the combat actiony side of things. Like that does appeal to me a lot, but honestly, most of the avenues appeal to me. If they get scanning down, I think I would be more interested in mining. Like I like the idea of mining, but I don't like the current state it's in right now, it doesn't appeal to me as much.
Mhm.
But if you can combine that with really fun exploration gameplay where you're like, okay, well, there's a bunch of rare caves down on this planet, and there's probably some ore in there. Okay, let's use scanning to find the caves. Let's go down there. Oh, there's some hostile creatures and aliens or bandits. Now we got to do a little FPS stuff. Okay, now we got to the super rare stuff. That type of gameplay loop appeals to me more, as opposed
Yeah.
to just sitting back and mining some asteroids for like 3 hours. That I'm going to get
Right.
bored with that. I want
I
a little
get you.
more adventure with it, right?
It feels like that's kind of the locations they're looking at. These central ground hubs and UGFs feel like they
Mhm.
want those to have like business areas, maybe some like mining opportunities and some combat and trading things going on. We'll get into that in a minute though. Last before we move on from mapping and stuff, what did you think of the star map overall compared to what we have now?
I mean, without question, a huge upgrade. I was co-streaming with Salty Mike, and he was being a bit salty about it, but his points were valid, which was that like the whole system, the underlying framework of it is really impressive, but it has none of the features that we actually need, like trading commodity prices, potentially setting up trade routes,
Yeah.
having the Galactopedia stuff kind of more integrated with the map, where you click on a planet and it's like, welcome to Stanton 4, home of,
Yeah.
and gives you like a little synopsis backstory, and then you can go deeper on that. There's very little info on the actual locations and the data there, which I assume is coming later, but
Yeah.
it was hard not to see a little extra flair. Like there wasn't a lot of flair. It was just technically very impressive with very little flair.
Yeah, I think the most flary thing where like the you click on you want you to go back to your spot and it like takes you like,
Yeah.
fly around the whole solar system. That stuff's cool. And those kind of quality of life improvements are great. Click to go back to the last point, click to go to your person. They like anchor your point on the map when you're off exploring
Mhm.
somewhere else. All that stuff's really good, and it makes it so that we have what seems to be an incredibly basic, or not basic, an incredibly solid first version of our star map actually going forward. But I agree.
Yeah.
Like I would like to know what is sold at a certain place, when you see it on the star map. And we didn't see anything about setting routes. They didn't give us that
Well,
example.
they did show the roots a little bit. But what was hard about the root thing is that they said search is coming, so they couldn't demo it with search. So you're like, I need to go to the I forgot the store names, but say the weapon shop, on Microtech. Okay, type in the name of the weapon shop or search weapons. Then having the store pop up, then setting the route. That's kind of where the map becomes really usable. Whereas now it's like it's a very cool tech demo, but the use cases are very limited because they haven't actually added in the really good usability features yet.
You have to
So
know exactly where everything is, which
yeah,
I don't disagree with. I think that actually helps with the whole getting data and data running stuff. Like if you go to a
yeah,
new system, it would make sense that you either have to go to a terminal to find out where everything in the system is, or you have to get that data from somebody else. So I see that. But
yeah.
yeah, you're right. Like you can't search for that stuff. And it would have been great if they had at least given us navigation from like New Babbage to Orison, so we could see how the star map would work out the idea that you have to get in your ship, then you have to go up to space, then you have to quantum jump, then you have to go down. As of right now, all it does is take us from one planet to the other,
Hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think, yeah, ultimately really good foundation, but it's just lacking all of that extra functionality. And I think part of that is because, as you can see from the Moby Glass that they're demoing it all from, it's still the Squadron 42 Moby Glass, has
Yep.
none of the tabs, none of the information from the PU. So it seems like they're just starting to consider the additional functionality that the PU would need from the star map. So, I mean, hopefully we see that additional functionality come next year, but it's hard to say, right? It all seems like it's being held up by whatever needs to be updated for the Moby Glass, which we don't really know how far along it is. But, they
Yeah.
keep saying it's coming in the next 12 months. A couple different people have said it now, and you're like, that sounds great. But
It
I
sounds
will say,
wonderful.
one thing that I appreciated them not doing was when you set a waypoint, making some sort of holographic path right in front of you that you follow. Instead, the path was on the minimap, and I appreciated that without them cluttering up your your UI too much, and you're not like literally just following a yellow path that you look at. You actually have to watch where you're going and be like, oh, I was supposed to take a left back there,
Yeah, that's pretty key. I would not be cool with a path in the actual real world. I also
Yeah.
think that it's probably something that you should have to either have a helmet or some kind of extra visor on. So like if you're not wearing anything that would give you an
Yeah.
AR display in this game particularly, it would make sense if it wasn't working.
Yeah. Even less reason to take off your spacesuit when you go to a city now.
There you go. They actually also showed in the Squadron 42 part, there was like a scene where you're walking behind Old Man and he's talking to somebody, and there's an objective marker on the mini map that shows that you're supposed to be following them, but they don't show the objective marker on your actual screen. And I'm not sure if that might be something special for that scene or if it can be turned off or on, but I also kind of appreciate that. Not putting the marker on the screen. That gets me, that annoys me after a while with some games.
Yeah, it kind of clutters up your visuals a bit, and then you're just like laser focused on running towards the little diamond in the distance.
Yeah,
as opposed
I never
to
explore.
Yeah, let me absorb my environment a little. Okay, it's that way for 400 meters, but does that way mean I'm climbing up a cliff? Am I going on through a waterfall? Like, I don't quite know yet. I'm just going to figure out what to do for the next 400 meters.
Yeah.
So that's better in my opinion. So hopefully they stick to, and they mentioned that throughout the presentation, especially when they were talking about the heads-up display for the new ship stuff. Trying to minimize all the junk on the screen, which was ironic because they said it right during a moment when there's like 50 billion missiles like chasing the player. And I was like, that's reducing clutter. Okay. And also they had the little holo map in the center of the Gladius that's supposed to show your targets around you. And that looked impossible to read. There was like 50 things on there. And I was like, this is the updated one? Okay.
I was surprised by that because it's actually really similar to the radar we've always had, right? That's basically
it looked almost identical with just a few visibility things cleared up slightly. But I was disappointed that it didn't show larger objects like asteroids or the station that you're flying next to, because it could be used as a really good collision avoidance tool.
Yeah.
Like, we've all been in an asteroid field trying to shoot down a bounty and then hit an asteroid. There's no good tools other than your ship occasionally going, oh, you're about to hit something. And you go, what?
And then you hit
the thing. Yeah. It's like, it'd be nice if there's like a map that showed the asteroid's position related to my spaceship. So I could be like, oh, I'm kind of getting close to this big rock. Maybe I should make some distance before I do get too close.
You know what? I bet what they showed us is not what they want. Because I feel like they would have drawn more attention to that if that's what they actually wanted to ship with. And what you're talking about, they've talked about, because that's what they want to do for landing cameras. Instead of having cameras, they want to just give us like a 3D look at our ship.
I thought they were going to show it during the landing sequence.
I really
I was ready for it. And I was like, here we go. Oh, they just landed on a planet. We've all seen that before.
That was, especially because after that, there was nothing. It felt like they flew down there specifically to show us something, but then they just landed and they're like, okay.
You're like, I've done this 100 times, guys. Show me the new thing. Yeah.
I thought they were going to show us the the heat system as well. I was actually quite surprised we didn't really see how heat would kick in when control surfaces stopped working. But I guess that's coming later.
Yeah. Control surfaces was cool, though. That was neat to see that. As soon as I saw it, I went, oh, no. This is never coming, because they got to do it for like 100 ships.
It's going to take a long time. Yeah.
It's going to take so long to get controls. Like, it's cool that it looks nice with the Gladius, but I had so many questions about control surfaces. Like, if you get into a dogfight in Atmo, will you be able to switch back into your full mode where you can use all your thrusters and do kind of crazy maneuvers, or will it be beneficial to fly in control surfaces? Will you fly more like airplanes when you're in an atmospheric dogfight? Like,
there's a lot. It's an early thing. I think it's something they're going to apply to like the Squadron 42 ships, but I feel like as far as the things we saw at CitizenCon announced, that I kind of associate with base building. I think base building is still further out, but control surfaces seems like it's going to be a while. Yeah.
It seems like they've had to dial it in for the Gladius, because there was shots during the Squadron 42 trailer of control surface style flying through the canyon area on that one planet. So I assume they fleshed it out for the Gladius, but obviously that's step 1 out of
Right.
step 500, for getting
Yeah.
it into the PEO. So yeah, a lot of these features are like, here's what's working in Squadron 42. Okay, what's the actual work involved to get it over to the PEO? Like 10x more? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how much of a combat pilot you are, but during that same panel with the control surfaces, they showed us a lot of changes to ship flight. You
Yeah.
remember that very well? Anything that
Oh
stood out to
yeah.
you?
Yeah, a lot of it. One was, why did they get such bad people to fly the ships when they were demonstrating? Like the Squadron 42 trailer, especially. I was like, who's flying? Is Chris flying these ships for the actual capture session?
It's Bone, man. Come on.
They couldn't hit anything. And I was like, so part of me was like, does this system suck, or do the people flying like really not, I want to see smooth tracking of targets and people that know what they're doing when you're demonstrating flight combat stuff. And it was all
That's
very
fair. That's fair.
clunky, but I'm chalking it up to bad devs recording
Yeah,
this session.
I don't know. I kind of assume that they like purposefully make them bad so everybody else feels better. But then it's like, why aren't these just QA players who do this every day? Just
Yeah. Well, you want to make it look cool and not clunky, and not
right.
like you're hitting 1 in 20 shots. It's like, okay, like you're a professional pilot. You should be
It's
landing more of your shots.
It's like the scene from the Squadron 42 part, the FPS scene. When they first started out, the guy goes and loots the body, and he's just like, why didn't they do that with the ship combat? Somebody who knows how to work the system.
Yeah, I liked. Here's the thing. I know we're saying we're critiquing a lot of stuff, but overall, 10 out of 10 still for CitizenCon. All of the stuff they showed off was really cool. I'm very excited about it, but I am skeptical of little things and little details, and especially when it comes to combat. That is the part of the game that you have to get like dialed in for it to be right. And they have so many things still coming for combat, like, how do missiles really work? Can we shoot them down yet? Blade tech, how's that going to affect combat? Armor is still allegedly coming. We now have this whole new destruction system where systems fail based on this giant
ammo
flow
types.
chart. Ammo types. There's new weapons like burst fire stuff coming in allegedly at some point. Docking board. Like there's all these variables that are going to change everything that we know about combat, and we're still sort of in this very proto era of it. So I always want to see more.
Yeah.
But I did like the zoom in thing. I thought the targeting ship components was really cool on the Hammerhead. That made me happy, because that's what you need for fighters versus capital class ships, is some way to be like, okay, I'm going for the engines, or I'm going for the turrets. Like you have a strategy now how to take out the bigger ship piece by piece. And that's been needed for a while, is to make that more accessible. When it comes to master modes, I like the concept behind it. I think it's a great way to make it more accessible to novice pilots and reward veteran pilots for their added skill. So I'm all on board with that. Again, it came down to some of the UI stuff. The thing I didn't like was the G-force sensitive kind of head swing in the cockpit.
Oh man, the boost.
It started to make me a bit sick. I know it's already in the persistent universe a bit, and I know at least people have told me that you can start dialing that back. You can turn it down to like 10% of what it is or something, but I don't love it. It's not my favorite feature. And I think there's like a bunch of different ways they could communicate trajectories to the player. Like if you're moving to the left hard, they don't really they have a very small vector indicator. That little double diamond thing that you see?
Yeah.
It's like this tiny little thing. It's like, make that more pronounced, especially when it's off to the side of my screen. If I'm going hard left, like tell me that I'm going hard left. I should be able to see that in my peripheral vision rather than have to search around the screen for what direction I'm actually going. You can use more sound. Elite Dangerous uses sound better to communicate speed and direction than Star Citizen does. I would say, like, if you've ever flown the Car2All, it uses sound a bit more interestingly to communicate the relative speed of your ship. And those are some ideas that I think they should be carrying over into more ships in the game, because you can use a lot more stuff other than like throwing your camera around to try and simulate G-force. I don't think it's the right way to go.
The one where you boost, like the new thing they show where you boost and you lean back, you're like on the recliner, you just all the way back here, and you're like holding on to your ship.
It makes no sense also in terms of like how you would be strapped in. Like if you've ever watched Blue Angel pilots who do these crazy maneuvers and they're like hitting high G's and stuff, like they're really strapped in because obviously you don't want to be going flying forward when you hit the air
braking,
brakes and slamming into the back of your seat. Like that's ridiculous. You're strapped in. If you ever watch like an F1 racer they hit like 5-6 Gs in turns sometimes, they don't have any room to like throw their body around, they're like locked in this close on either side with padding, like so the effect in Star Citizen, while it might add this kind of cool thing, I felt very unrealistic to me and somewhat nauseating to me as somebody who gets a little bit affected by motion sickness and stuff. I was like,
see.
ugh.
I'm partial to it. I like it. I'll probably tone it down for myself. I do like that sense of inertia that it gives, even if it's a little bit unrealistic. But definitely the lean back one was. I don't know if it was the big screen in the show or just that it was pronounced, but it was a little bit too much, I think.
You can test that in game right now.
Really?
I find it very off-putting, especially in combat, because your camera distance to your targeting reticle and the position of your targeting reticle is constantly moving. So trying to track a target while changing directions and manipulating your ship, you get like your pip starts to move all over the place now because of your head moving. And I'm just like, I don't like this at all.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
How about quantum travel? The updates to quantum travel, both regular travel and quantum boost. What do you think?
Yeah. So I spent some time talking about this in a video today, actually. And I think they need to go further with it. I love what they set up for entering your quantum bubble until you get a quantum lock or whatever, a bubble lock, whatever they called it, right? You got to like pull your stick so that you're aiming right into it and you got to fight the forces that it's throwing on your ship.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're locked into quantum. Cool. I think that's a great system. Like adds some more hands-on time. It adds a bit more skill. It makes traveling more interesting since traveling is going to be such a big part of this game. Let's put a little bit more skill, a little bit more engagement behind it. I want them to go further and add some sort of fast lane system to the bigger quantum distance travel. So if you want to go take a bathroom break or go maintain your ship while you're in a 4 or 5 minute quantum jump, cool, go do that. If you're running a cargo mission or trying to meet up with friends as fast as possible and you're trying to save fuel and time, now you have the option to navigate into some sort of fast lane. Maybe it's like a spline that moves around and you have to kind of stay in that area and you'll get a speed boost and maybe more fuel. I just want more hands-on time because if you look at Euro Truck Simulator, you're always hands-on. You got to watch out for traffic. You got to pay attention to your map. You got to turn off when you need to. You got to navigate around people. You got to watch out for other people turning. Even though it's a fairly mundane, fairly straightforward process from getting from A to B, it's still always hands-on, and that's why people like that type of thing. If you give me a game where every time you jump, and I'm an EVE player, so I know exactly what this is like. Every time you jump, it's just a hands-off experience, and you just sit back and relax, and you have to make, I don't think people realize you're going to be jumping from system to system to system to system as the game gets bigger. There's going to be a lot of time spent in quantum. If that process can be made more entertaining, I think they need to do it. And I think they need to start designing that right now, as opposed to just some quick little entry mechanic, but that's my stay. I want the option so that people don't have to do it if they don't want to, because there seems to be a lot of people that do want the hands-off gameplay.
Right.
And that's cool, but I want more hands-on stuff,
I'm with you with the idea of rewarding people for being active, like having a navigator role on your ship that's always making sure you're at fastest quantum. But yeah, it's also like you want to have that ability, like you said, to get up and like repair stuff or manage your inventory, make some calls and stuff. I like that idea though of some kind of fast lane. I think there was something in Wing Commander about trade lanes. People have kind of theorized that be like, the spaces in between the big systems or big planets, if you jump between those, then you're going faster, as opposed to like jumping between sort of offset locations or locations that don't normally match up. But I'm not sure if that's going to be a thing or not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the trade lanes things, but I'm all for making travel more interesting because it's very boring right now and it's going to be such a big portion of the game. I think they need to spend just more time making it more entertaining, because
Sure.
EVE Online, you set the autopilot, you hit jump, and then you're just like, what am I going to do for the next 40 minutes?
Well, you look at your spreadsheets, of course.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I don't play Eve because I got sick of it. I don't want Star Citizen to become Eve, right? So I'm like, they're going in the right direction with their skill-based gameplay and their more hands-on gameplay. I'm like, yeah, just take that direction and push it into your quantum travel now. Give me that option to use my skill or my hands-on stuff to go faster, right?
Yeah. What do you think about the new effects? I love them.
Oh, so pretty. The whole engine looks incredible now. Everything. Yeah, the quantum effect looked really nice. Can't wait to
Yeah.
see what the Xeon quantum effect is and the
Oh
other
yeah.
alien
The
ships. I
Banu.
bet. Yeah, those are going to look dope, dude. R.I.P. Banu Merchantman.
Oh man, I wonder if they're coming up with new quantum ones or custom ones for that.
I bet you they are, right? Like it sounds fun. I hope that depending on the type of drive or maybe even the manufacturer, it might change a little bit, right? Because they talked about your quantum drive affecting getting into that quantum bubble state, right? It might be
Yeah.
harder with some of the faster drives. It seemed to be what they're indicating. I'm like, that's cool. I like that. What if it also looks a little different? What if whatever Gray Cat quantum drives, I don't know who makes quantum drives, but somebody who makes quantum drives, what if
The
theirs have
Gray
like
Cat quantum drive.
a little tinge of yellow to them, and then somebody watching who's intimately familiar with the game can be like, oh man, you got the new Gray Cat drive or whatever, right? Like I love that idea of being able to at a glance know the components and the inner workings of somebody's ship based on visual representation,
Yeah. And I feel like Quantum Boost is like really the company finally, like that feels like the setup for what everybody is kind of thinking of exploration. Like you quantum jump to an area and then you do your long distance scan, and then now Quantum Boost is like your method of really going and finding the things that you see that other people might not. And also you could just do it in any direction. It's beautiful.
What did you, I believe anyway, you're into the whole concept of scanning gameplay. What did you think about their deep dive into scanning with all that super interesting information?
Man, I really expected them to come out and give us a deep dive, like an actual look at
like the rest
because
of the panels.
because they introduced the idea of long distance probing 2 years ago, I think now, 2021, I believe, fall of 2021. I made a video on it and everything. Man, I was so excited.
Yeah.
I was like 6 months, man, 1 year. Ooh, we might be hearing about this. We're like 3 years later, and they did another PowerPoint on it. Just really, it disappointed me.
And it was super vague, and they did it like almost as we have to do this to sell you the Cutter Scout.
Right.
You're like, why are you selling the Cutter Scout right now? This is the word you just said you weren't going to launch ships with no gameplay loops, and now you're like, here's the Cutter Scout. Oh yeah, scanning isn't a thing still.
It's like, can the Scout do this? Is this why you're talking about it? And then it ended up not being the thing. I think that was like one of the few losses during this show is just introducing that to not have anything to kind of back it up was a bummer.
Yeah, I love the look of the Cutter Scout, but why does the Terrapin need a giant scanning room with like a chair that hangs off of the ceiling and like rotate? You're like, how does scanning work? Like it seems really insane.
If you're sitting down, it's much more powerful.
Yeah, if you're sitting in a chair hanging from the ceiling that can swivel around, I'm like, what's going to happen in this scanning room? It seems insane, and then the Cutter is a single seater and it's also a scanning ship. So you're like, okay, Terrapin Cutter. I think the Terrapin's going to fall into that same sort of reclaimer situation where they're like, all the systems we've designed for the game don't quite work with the old ship design anymore. So
it's definitely a case of we're going to have to change this ship to match the gameplay at some point.
Yeah. Sadly, that's a growing list of ships now. But
I mean, that's what happens when you have to sell ships to fund a game that doesn't have ships working. It's like, this is, and that's also, I think, what some of people think could be the, not necessarily death, but a major thing that holds Star Citizen back. It's just like, you cannot keep all these ships updated with all these things that they can do.
Yeah. I mean, they got to grow that ship team even bigger, man. They were talking about the exodus of people. I'm like, you only got, was it 28 people or something on the ship team? I mean, that's a lot of people, but nonetheless, you're like, look at the quantity of ships and then the ships you're going to have to go back and redesign. Like they're doing the 600i retrofit or whatever right now. And that's a huge project, obviously. They're going to have to do it to I mean,
They got a lot.
Constellation probably, Freelancer, like
And all of
probably,
those
yeah,
are
Vulture probably eventually, with the
and
weird cargo bay thing.
right, yeah. And none of those are sales. That's all tech debt. That's all
Yeah.
stuff they just
Well,
have to do to keep
I
up.
think 2.0 sales can work because people who missed out, because people coming into the game now are going to be less inclined to want to buy a Constellation, right? Like it's kind of the old clunkier ship. It's not as new and sexy as the cooler stuff that's in the game. So I would imagine the sales for some of those old ships have dropped off a bit to an
Yeah.
extent. So doing a 2.0 relaunch will get the people who never got it the first time around to be like, oh, okay. I think there
Yeesh.
is monetary value in there, and I think they'll learn from the 600i probably how
Man,
much there is.
that's going to that'll catch some flack. It will look like double dipping with the potential of triple dipping
Oh,
in 5 years.
I think it'll have the opposite effect because anyone
Yep.
who bought the ship is going to be happy that they get a free upgrade, right?
Well,
They're going to be
yeah.
like, yeah, cool. I bought the crappy Connie. Now I got the new Connie, and the crappy one's going to be used as like a mission location, right? Here's the old constellation that's crashed into a planet. Now I can explore that one, which is kind of probably what the Reclaimer is going to be, and probably the Caterpillar too. The Caterpillar's become quite out of date with all of
Oh, yeah.
it can't even fit the 32 SCU
Those
cargo boxes
elevator
in it.
doors. Ugh.
Yeah, none of that stuff makes sense. You're like, how is any of this going to actually work with the systems you've designed? So I think a bunch of ships are going to do that, but I think anybody who owns it will be happy to get a 2.0 upgrade, and anybody who didn't own it before and is interested in the new model is just like, okay, here's a cool new version of a ship. I wasn't interested before, but now that they made all these neat changes, now I'm curious. So maybe I'll pick that up.
It's better for the game, for sure.
Yeah.
Who knows how people will react.
I think they should spend like once they get through a bunch of their workload on ships right now, is they should spend like a year just going back, maybe 2 years going back and just updating old clunky ships that just clearly were designed before they knew how they were going to fully function. I think doing a ship health update or something would be nice.
It's a lot of those. A lot of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Let's talk about new missions and locations. Generally, I'm thinking those new ground locations, the big sort of central hubs they talked about.
Yeah.
And also like the new outposts and stuff in Pyro. Specifically, though, I guess, why don't we start with the raids? Like they have actually now used the word. We always
Yeah.
kind of looked at these locations and we were like, oh, those are kind of our dungeons. That's where we'll do the raids. Now they're really leaning into it. What's your take on that?
It looks great, man. Everybody seemed excited about getting your crew together, the idea of doing a raiding party. I hope they make sure that there's lawful and unlawful, like so that if you don't want to become a criminal, you can still partake in these big difficult missions. So maybe the raid will be like, hey, our facility is under attack. We need you to come in and like really clear out the whole area, and then you can keep whatever loot you find along the way or something, but like something like just so that everybody can partake in that and it's not
Yeah.
just a criminal activity. It looked awesome. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right? Is like, okay, maybe there's one hangar, so you can only bring one ship. So you got to load up in the same ship. Everybody's getting ready. They're getting all their gear together. You come in hot, people are on the guns. Maybe you're taking a little fire, do combat landing, get out, get into the action right away. I mean, that's what they've been advertising Star Citizen as for as long as I
Yeah.
can remember, is
The
all these cool
trailers.
trailers, the Valkyrie trailer, right? I was just like, oh yeah, this is going to be sick. You can like drive a Jeep out the back of the Valkyrie as it's flying over. And like, if they can actually create gameplay now that allows you to do that, like, it's going to be great,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like these sorts of missions, bringing those in, and specifically combining the whole ship and ground transport with the bullets from both ships and ground and all this stuff going on different planets, I feel like that could be their battlefield moment kind of thing. Like that, like you're saying, these are moments that are in trailers, and you see a trailer like that and you want to play it out. That could be what Star Citizen ends up selling with opportunities like this, because you just can't play games where there are spaceships and people in the same space and you have all these different systems working together.
Yeah. I think it gives them a ton of variety too, based on how they talked about the modularity of like potentially cave systems under these facilities where you could just extend them as long as you need to or make the missions really crazy and wild. Or you could give some of these bases tons of anti-air defense. So you have to like land further away and drive a vehicle in and going on foot, you know? So
Yes.
instead of you landing on the facility, now you have to drive to it. You know, I want to see that kind of variety in there, and it does look cool.
Yeah.
Like the size of them too, man. Those vistas, you're just like, that's dope. Just having a giant facility in the middle of a forest on Microtech, and you can
Yeah.
just like stare for like 100 miles in the distance. It's cool.
It is very cool, and I'm glad they're making them they're doing this with the outposts too, they mentioned. This was like such great news, man. It's like what we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
They talked about how these ground locations will have like localized missions. So you're not going to this ground location and getting a mission that requires you to fly across the system. You're getting a mission that tells you, yeah, drive 5 kilometers to this cave and save somebody from it. And it's like,
Yeah.
you get that more localized feeling of like, I'm actually in a universe where I'm doing something for this planet in this town, as opposed to constantly connecting dots between all these unrelated things.
Yeah. So you were on the floor. Did you get to play Pyro while you're there?
I did. Yeah. Yes.
So what did you think of the new missions? I heard the combat missions are pretty legit in terms of like the you're not in a bunker, you're like assaulting like a whole outpost area.
So remember before the podcast we were talking about how busy I was, I didn't get to do much.
Yeah.
I was planning on playing Pyro more than once, but I only got to do it once, and in that one time they give you 40 minutes to play, and I didn't leave the space station until I had like 12 minutes left. So,
oh man, I get that though. Yeah.
it was something else, man. I mean, I wanted to see every detail, and I didn't realize what that meant for these new space stations are absurd. I'm pretty sure there's more space in these new space stations than there are in our landing zones. I might be wrong, but the amount of exploration I did here, I mean, I have video too. I'll show you after the podcast. I was running down random pathways in this space station for at least a minute and a half. And then they went from being walkways to like broken pipes. And so I was starting to run past like these really derelict parts of the station where people didn't really seem like they were all together or doing stuff. And it just like the atmosphere is amazing. It was really cool.
That sounds awesome. During that station presentation that they did, when they showed the derelict stations and the idea of like coming across like maybe something that's like a secret pirate hideout or something and like going through these dark areas, it just looked awesome. Like the atmosphere looked unlike anything I'd seen in any other game. Like how many games do you dock on an abandoned station and go hunting around with your flashlight and maybe run into aliens or like pirates that are running the show? It looks awesome. Dude, I couldn't wait for that.
That's the thing, man. Like we watch these shows like God, what's it called? Why am I forgetting this now?
The Expanse?
Yeah, The Expanse. Oh, I can't believe I forgot that. We watch these shows like The Expanse and we see these like dramatic scenes of Zero G entering a ship and like going around and doing salvage work. And it's like, that's literally what they're building. The abandoned part of the space station, I went in there. It's in game.
Yeah.
You can walk around in it. You can find some loot in there. I ran into some of the gangs that they showed off there. And that was like, I mean, night and day from other CitizenCons when you're seeing stuff on the panels and you're like, how many years until we get this? Seeing stuff on the panels, and then I went and played it, and I was watching people talk about these new panels that they were showing these assets, and people were like, yeah, but when? I'm like, I played it.
Yeah.
Like the patch might not be out, but this is a tech they can't do.
They're trying to get it out by like what, the 31st or something. So
this will come with. Oh yeah. That's right, for the
Pyro, for
the new preview channel. Yeah,
you're
right.
So I mean, other people are going to get to check it out really soon. I don't know when you're posting this podcast, but very shortly after, right? So
yeah, it'll be the following day after we post this podcast. People will start getting access to Pyro. So like this stuff's happening.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing that I think, I wouldn't say saved CitizenCon, but sort of backed up a lot of the stuff. Was like, people are like, when? There's always the when question. And they mentioned the 12-month thing for a lot of the features, but they're also like, hey, you're also getting Pyro in like a week, so, or at least people who make the first wave and then next wave and then
we'll see how that goes. I don't know how they're going to handle that. Oh,
I don't know. I'm okay with their wave system. Mathematically, it makes a lot of sense for like getting good testing hours at different times, but I understand some people are like, I want to be first. And it's like, well, whatever. They got to make a
Yeah.
game too, right?
Yeah. But yeah, the Pyro, the stuff that I saw was great. I mean, I spent all that time in that station. Funny thing is I was running a mission. I was supposed to go find somebody in the abandoned part of the station, and it's just
Oh,
such a big freaking area, dude. Like, I was so lost.
that's
Um,
awesome, man. Well,
but
you'll
it
have a
was,
map eventually.
yeah, yeah. And like, I did not have a problem being lost. I was so giddy. I was like, I run into a rest stop in Stanton, and there's like 3 rooms, right? There's like
Yeah.
2 places that matter. You go into a landing zone at a city. You got a store section, you got a residence section, you got a starport. Like, it's fairly basic. This felt like a good mixture. Like, I wasn't going to an area to do one thing. I was like
Yeah.
walking around, and naturally things were changing. It felt a lot more dense and lived in. I did get out
Mhm.
of the station, and I eventually jumped to a planet, but I didn't get to do much. Morphologist was sitting next to me, and he ran a couple of combat missions on the ground, and it looked amazing. He
Yeah.
was fighting multiple groups of people. He was driving like a vehicle around this like town, basically, and like kind of getting ambushed in different areas. He got shot at while he was flying in with his ship, so like NPCs engage you in the air now. So it was just generally all the gameplay I saw was a step up from what we're doing, but who knows how the stability is going to be and all that stuff. That's really what hampers the experience anyways in the game now.
Sure. The servers, from what I believe they said, were actually local at the event. So you guys
Mm.
were getting like primo, like Star Citizen servers, basically.
I felt well pampered.
Yeah.
It's not falling
Yeah.
through floors.
Oh man, it looked cool. And I think one of the things that makes this so meaningful to longtime fans of the game is that we have played Stanton to death, and then they come out with a new mission and it's like in the same bunker that you've run every other mission. You're like, I
Same
don't
bunker.
care.
Yeah. Same
You're like,
faction.
I don't care. It's the same bunker. I can't stand it. I don't want to ever go to that bunker again. And now Pyro is like, here's like just as much, if not more content that's in Stanton, but in a completely new area with crazy looking new stations, completely new vibe. There's there's solar flares that come off of the star and knock out your ship now. Like, that's insane. Like,
Yeah.
hearing that alone, I was like, whoa, there's like cosmic events that happen in Pyro.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That sounds awesome.
It is tangibly different. I was flying around in there in the gas clouds. I got lost. Like, I
Yeah.
legitimately, I was like 300 meters from a space station and I could not find it. So
Whoa.
overall, like, all of the stuff going on, okay, maybe 3,000 meters, not 300. But either way,
Yeah.
it feels different, which is good. And there are a ton of missions locked into new factions, and they do slightly different things. Like, some of the missions are on space stations and stuff now. I'm not going to say it's a new game, but it is a breath of fresh air, especially for people who have been sick of Stanton.
Yeah. Well, and I think most people don't want a new game too. They want Star Citizen, but just more variety, right? And they want
Sure.
new locations, so it seems like it's going to go a very long way there. Um, can I add some random off topic stuff to
Do it.
did you see the translation of Benoit's interview
The one
on Reddit?
on server meshing or quantum stuff?
Server meshing. So
Yes, I
he
did. I did.
mentioned, yeah, so that was a pretty important interview. I mean, at least there's some really good information there, where they talked about the replication layer stuff that is coming late 3.21, the current patch that we're on right now, is going to offload enough of the overhead on servers that they think they can bump the player count up to 150, which sounds
Oh, I
really
didn't read
cool.
that part.
Oh, you didn't read that? Okay.
No, I feel like I read the whole thing. Maybe I missed. Was that the first paragraph? I might have missed that part.
I just went to a Reddit thread where somebody translated the main points of what he said, and so that's one of the points.
Okay, yeah, I skipped the points and just read the interview, so I think I missed that part.
Okay. So that part sounds really encouraging. I'm hoping that I would rather have more reactive AI than bumping the player count. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure when they're going to decide to have AI get good, basically, because that's such an important part of the game being fun.
we all
So
experience it when you go into a server and there's 50 players and you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and then it runs for a day, and you're like, oh yeah, they're back to not doing anything again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I died when they booted up 3.20 for the first time, and I went to a bunker, and I brought like 2 mags with me or something. It's like, this will be fine. I'll just loot a gun off of somebody, and all of a sudden the AI are like, no, 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 we're gonna push you like really hard, and you're gonna run out of ammo, and then we're gonna kill you. And I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
never happened to me before. So that was exciting to see what the AI do when the servers aren't overloaded. So replication layer leading to literal server performance tech is like obviously huge for everything.
Yeah.
Cool to expand the player count, but I hope that expansion also comes with improved AI, because that's way more important to me than I'd rather have 100 players with better AI
Agreed.
than 150 with brain dead AI.
Yeah. Like AI is
Mhm.
kind of what makes the game still not feel like a game. If AI were flying around and interacting with us and doing stuff, this would feel way more complete.
Yeah. Yeah. The other note that I took away from that interview was kind of reiterating or reconfirming what I think Chris and some of the other devs sort of alluded to, was that because Squadron 42's in this polish or more of the polish phase right now, a lot of the talent that was building assets and doing a lot of hardcore back end coding can now come over to the PU and work on
Yeah.
PU stuff. So Benoit mentioned a bit of that, saying a lot of people are coming back to the PU, and that's why. And they're not doing the R&D of these systems anymore. They're doing the kind of polish
Implementation.
side, yeah, implementation and getting it working better. And so he seemed really confident about hitting that 12-month mark for like the vast majority of stuff. So it's nice to hear somebody else say it other than Chris, because
Yeah.
we know how Chris is with due dates and stuff. You know, he's very excited. It's his baby. He wants it to come out.
Yeah. And
But to hear Benoit say it, I was like, okay, well, all right, he's doubling down, man. Like, that's good.
yeah, Benoit seems to be pretty realistic whenever he's on camera and talking. So
Hmm.
that's good to hear. And I mean, we don't know necessarily, like they say a lot of these devs are going from Squadron back to the PU, so there should be more work getting done. I would be interested in comparing what that might look like to what was the case before they started to focus so much on Squadron, because it's not like we had a ton of progress back then. But like you said, this is an R&D work. This is a different CIG than back then, and it feels like they're more kind of in development mode. So I am cautiously, cautiously going to jump into that belief that that is true, that their devs are going back there. Things
Yeah.
could speed up. I'm not going to say it's the floodgates that we're all prophesizing, but yeah, maybe things will finally.
Victims of an abusive relationship here. You know, we're all like, I
Yeah.
want to believe what you're saying. I really do. You know, we all need to sit down and have a long therapy session with CIG. But I'm in the same boat. I want to believe that on paper it sounds right. You know, you get all this extra talent pouring back into the PU. It's a huge company now. Like, what
Hmm.
does that mean? 400 people, 500 people moving
Right.
back over to the PU? That's huge. So I want to believe that they could do a huge amount of work in 12 months. So, I mean, yeah, I want to believe that 2024 is going to be the golden year of Star Citizen, where everything starts to happen.
Oh boy.
But we'll
I
see, man. I mean, I'll ask Morphologist. You know, he predicted 2023 almost perfectly,
mm,
and everybody gave him so much flack for it because it was negative, right? Because at the beginning of the year, he's like, "Not a lot's going to happen, guys." Like, hate to break it to you, you know.
yeah,
And
he
but
was
it
right.
was right.
They a lot of that stuff stayed in Squadron for I guess another year. Like that's kind of what it seemed like
We don't
happened.
have EVA. We don't have any of the stuff that they said last year would be coming right now. You know,
Right. So it
so
really does feel like they should not have been talking about the whole moving it from Squadron last year. But if they hadn't, then it's like, oh man, just not.
yeah. It's just Chris, man. He can't help it. He
Yeah.
wants us to play it. He wants us to see the cool thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because clearly they're doing really cool stuff in Squadron, which they just haven't been able to show us, or they've
Hmm.
chosen not to show us to
Yeah.
avoid spoiling the single player.
That
So we're all
was
just sitting here and they're like, trust us, guys. It's really cool. And we're like, okay.
That's the funny thing is how blown away we all were from the I Held the Line trailer, because the gameplay actually looked like such good gameplay. We were all like, is this what you've been sitting on for years? And we've been playing with your your leftover systems in the PU. Like they're like
Yeah.
5 versions ahead in the HUD for Squadron, and we're still playing with something they came up with in like
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah, all their UI is like, this is the UI that the game is meant to be played on. We're
Right.
like, what is this crappy stuff left over from like
The
an
freaking
updated
inventory system?
2013, 14 build of the game or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
inventory is an absolute nightmare. Just everything is just all over the place. So,
That was like, I think that's why everybody came away so excited, because up until now, I said this at the beginning and I'll say it again, they have shown us plenty of marketing videos, they've shown us plenty of vertical slices, they've shown us all kinds of, here are the Squadron 42 features coming up. But it wasn't until this last weekend that I actually looked at something they showed us and I was like, that looks like an actual game. Because
mhm.
like the previous Squadron 42 vertical slice, if you go back and watch that, like there's a ton of stuff that's just missing. I mean, there's not even a HUD, right? There's not even a radar and a compass and all this jazz. So it was
Yeah, I
hard to
watched your
believe.
comparison video. Really good job, by the way.
Thank you.
Was enjoying the side by side stuff.
Yeah.
And it is pretty wild how different it is. You're like, oh my God, I'm glad they didn't release it back in like 2018 or something.
Yeah.
Would have been a really mediocre game, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. All right. Let's
What did
see.
you think about this? Kind of was like the second hype wave of CitizenCon. Is it sort of ended and then everybody's watching the reaction videos of the guys who are not Star Citizen fans.
Yeah.
Asmon's kind of Dr. Disrespect trolling a little bit, but other people too, like
Hmm.
going, oh wow, this looks insane. Like, is this what they're seeing it for the first time. All they've ever heard about Star Citizen is that it's a spaceship game scam,
Yeah.
and that people are throwing money into this for no reason. So um them seeing it for the first time and being like, what the heck is this? That was kind of fun to watch, fun to
Yeah.
see. And it threw a lot of credibility. I mean, the trailer's at like over 1 million views, I think, now.
Yeah.
And it's just added credibility, right? I think that means a lot too to the fan base, which is like, we're seeing all the stuff that other people are choosing not to see because they'll read the article from Kotaku or whatever, and that's
Right.
their perception of Star Citizen. We're like, no, but like if you get into the game, like you can do all this cool stuff, guys. It's right there. And their minds are blown on, like Asmon was like, what? You're like transitioning seamlessly to like a planet surface. Like, okay, we've seen that for like what, 5 years now, like quite a while.
Yeah.
We've been experiencing
I
that,
mean,
but seeing them see it for the first time and be like, whoa, like that's awesome.
yeah.
It was cool.
I do think it means a lot to the community. It's not only is it fun to just finally see other people realize what you're so amazed by and excited for, but it's a little validating, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not particularly fun to talk about Star Citizen outside of Star Citizen, and I think
Yeah. Come over to my
almost,
channel, dude. You can get
whew,
all the
yeah, I
scam
bet.
citizen comments,
I bet.
dude.
So like for a lot of people, it's nice to finally have not only footage and like proof, but also the opinions of such big names. That's like when your friend, you're trying to tell your friend about this game and maybe they're like, oh, Star Citizen, I heard about that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. Look, check this out. Look at what people are saying about it for like the first time.
Yeah.
It's actually true. And I think that means a lot for people who have just been hoping that this was going to turn into a good game for years now.
Yeah. When Asmund was doing the StarEngine React thing on his stream, he said the thing that caught me the most and sort of like made me feel validated the most was he was watching all this tech and he's like, I see why people have been putting money into this project. And I was just like, thank you. Like, it's because we see what it could do. People believe in it. It just
Yeah,
it made me feel less like a cult member for a second.
I put up a video. I would check it out if I were you. It's on my second channel. I put up a video that took everything that he did. So I didn't want to put up the whole reaction. I feel like there's enough reactions to his reactions to that. So instead, I cut all of the different parts because I did the reaction live. I cut all the parts from that where he was like progressively getting more positive. And so it's like he starts out and he's like, I mean, this looks pretty decent. And then the next one, he's like, oh, this looks kind of good. And he keeps going and he gets like
Yeah.
interesting and then like very good and then super fucking awesome. And then like at the end of the video, it has him sitting up in front of the camera right before it closes, just being like, yo, I understand. I get why people waited. Like you said, I get why people waited. And I was like, this is such a perfect way to show people that we went through this over the course of years. some people, I don't know if it'll stick for him, but some people are going to go through that over the course of a video. They're going to realize they've actually been doing stuff here, and it's actually something that I find interesting, and they're sticking to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the public narrative change, like if that's what it feels like is happening right now, is the public narrative on the game. Obviously, nothing's been released yet, so we can't say Squadron 42 is a great game or anything,
Sure. Yeah.
but people are looking at it now going like, this looks like a good game. So maybe it's not, the scam citizen thing is like that narrative almost seems like it's dying right now of them saying, okay, it's not a scam. It might not be a great game, but it's definitely not. They've been doing stuff, like this
Yeah.
doesn't just, the StarEngine just doesn't come out of nowhere. Like we see where the money's going. So that was very validating as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There is Luke Stevens, somebody I watch a bit on YouTube. He had a very good point. He was like, what if this does come out and it's just mid? And before, like a couple years ago, I would have been like, you know what, that's cool. As long as Squadron 42 is decent, we know that Star Citizen will have good gameplay. But after seeing this weekend, I don't think the game can come out and be mid. Like it can't look that good and then
it has to be great.
Very good. Yeah.
I will say that's my biggest concern right now is, and my video that I put out today talked about this a bit, was the FPS combat side of the game, which I think is the mainstream appeal, right? Like the spaceship stuff looks cool, but we know that's not going to get a mainstream in there.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have that fun FPS combat mixed in there as probably more of the gameplay versus the spaceship gameplay. It looked it just looked basic, kind of, right? Well,
I liked it, but I don't know FPS that well. I played Halo my whole life, and I didn't really start comparing games like that. So I would like to hear more of the subtleties. I talked with
Morph a little bit about this, and he thinks that they're just holding back on a lot of the features, which I hope they are, because they clearly didn't show you fighting Vandal or anything like that. Like they stuck the gameplay trailer to like probably the first couple missions of the game, right?
Absolutely,
and not spoiling beyond that.
You can tell from the scenes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all kind of the same areas in the Archon station and down on that one planet by it. But the guns are all like, here's a basic SMG, here's a basic assault rifle, here's a grenade. Okay, and the enemy variety was just like, here's the same enemies that aren't really, there's not like a guy with a big riot shield. There's not a dude with a jump jet flying overhead. There's not a dude that cloaks and sneaks up on you. There wasn't a sniper trying to take you out from across the map. The gameplay looked very standard in that regard. And so I'm hoping, what?
Oh, sorry. I want to, because I feel like I was misunderstanding what you meant. You're talking more about the overall scenario and not the actual act of like shooting the guns.
Yeah. So for me, gameplay is like, okay, the gun's got to feel good. The movement's got to feel good. The enemy AI has to feel good. But now I need some of that spice in there, right? Like you go back to Halo 1 Combat Evolved. You had all these different types of enemies and archetypes that you had to engage differently. The big dude, the grunts or brutes, whatever, with their big shields, the elites, the little grunts that you would just kill really quickly. Like they had that variety right from the start, and that added so much to the gameplay fun. I see Star Citizen or Squadron 42 rather, and it's like, here's a bunch of pirates all with their kind of standard pirate guns, and I don't see anything that stands out that makes me go, oh, whoa, that was cool. There wasn't a moment in the FPS combat where I went, oh, whoa, that was pretty neat. Like the spectacle of the whole thing was cool, but the actual gameplay didn't have any of those moments. And so that's where I'm still skeptical. And, I trust Morph a lot, and he thinks they're holding a lot of stuff back. So maybe they really were trying to hold it back, not to surprise stuff, but that's going to matter a lot, I think, not just to me, but to the bigger audience that's not necessarily a Star Citizen fan right now. If they pick up the game, those people are going to want that crazy fun stuff in there. That stuff that they do a double take. They see the big bad guy and they're like, "What's this dude do?" Oh, he's got like a cool, like I don't know. I played Cyberpunk's new DLC recently, and they got dudes in these like kind of half mech suits, and they have like a beam laser cannon on the side of them and a bunch of other like AoE effects and stuff. And then as soon as I saw that dude, I was like, whoa, what's about to happen? And all of a sudden the combat changes completely, and I'm diving in all my stuff that I was doing for the other guys isn't working on this guy, and I'm having to adapt on the spot, and I'm running and he's blowing up my cover. And I was like, that was cool. Where is that in Squadron 42? I want to see that kind of stuff.
I get you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so that makes a lot more sense. Like enemy variety and stuff, things
Hmm.
is definitely not something we
And
saw.
weapon variety too, right? Like,
Yeah, but we know
cool.
they can do weapon
The
variety.
UE. Well, kind of. We know that they have that Volt gun, which is kind of the same thing as a normal gun, but it shoots electricity. Then they
Yeah,
have
but it sounds
laser
cool.
guns. Yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying, like, we don't have like, I don't know, a sonic weapon that shoots like a blast of sound and like knocks people down in a non-lethal way. We don't have bug grenades from Half-Life that you throw and then a bug goes and eats like an enemy or something.
Okay,
Like they
okay.
have variety in the sort of very military sense, but it would be cool if you like pick up a pirate gun and all of a sudden it's like a net launcher or something crazy, you know?
This guy's getting all his FPS up in my space sim, folks.
I want the game to be good is the
No,
thing. And
I agree with
I
you.
think there hasn't been enough criticism on that side of Star Citizen from the general community right now, just because of the makeup of the general community. And I want Star Citizen to be bigger than the current crowd, if that makes sense, you know?
I think it's also because the bar's so low. I mean, like I wasn't even considering enemy very like I would love enemy variety, but I'm over here
Yeah.
thinking, man, I would just really like if I could like easily know I'm about to run out of ammo, you know? Like I'm still thinking of all
Yeah.
these super basic things. So I agree with you. I had just never even thought about the idea that Star Citizen needs to start getting that stuff in. It's like that
Yeah.
extra on top, I guess, polished stuff, right? Like they've been talking
Mhm.
about. So given that, I'm really hoping that they take 2 years for this. I don't know about you. I'm
Mm.
I'm hoping that this is we are going to not burn out our people or crunch. We're going to make sure that everything is good to go because they only got one release. Even if this
Yeah.
release is bad, Star Citizen is not going to be doing well.
They can weather another 2 years of criticism if they launch a fantastic product. If they weather 1 year of criticism for taking their time and they release a mediocre product, it's going to be a much worse end result. So I do
Yeah.
agree with you there. And especially if the last polish phase or whatever that they're doing over there lets the PU expand much quicker and we start getting more cool content at a much
Hmm.
faster rate, that'll make the way easier because I am the multiplayer first guy, as I think many people are for Star Citizen. We care more about the persistent universe than the single player. I do care about both of them and I want to play both of them, but if I had to pick one and the other one would just die forever, I'd go with the PU, you know, PU till the end of time. So
Yeah.
um if that content starts getting good, then the wait will be fine. You know, we can do two more years, but I don't want
Yeah.
to. And I hope what they showed was like just a tease. Maybe some of the intro missions where they're trying to not overwhelm you with the crazy bad guys, but like, you know, imagine like being in that mission where you're fighting the pirates and one of them gets in the cutlass and it starts circling around you and you have to like go grab a railgun and shoot its engine off and then it like crashes into the ground and explodes some stuff around you. You know, like that type of stuff is what I would expect. Those are the moments that is going to get the average gamer to turn their head and be like, "Oh, okay, this looks cool," as opposed to just tactically clearing a bunch of areas
Right.
with the same types of bad guys over and over and over. You'll go crazy after like 4 missions of that. You know, you'll be like, "This is pretty boring."
Yeah. I do think I would have to agree with Morph on that point. Chris is not shy from advanced or cinematic things and very spectacular sort of surprise things. So I 100% think we're going to get some of the more interesting scenarios like that, and they're just kind of waiting on them. Because like if
Yeah.
you want to do your marketing push, you don't want to do it just yet.
Yeah, you want to save the good stuff for when you know you're kind of locked into that final leg of development, right? When you're like,
Yeah.
okay, we're about to hit gold and all that stuff.
Yeah. To finish things off here, we didn't get to go through nearly all the features that I wanted to go through, but I'm actually going to have you, hopefully, if you can make it, back around for a Citizen Central episode where we'll talk a little bit more about some of the
Sure,
FPS
man.
and mission-based stuff. But to finish off today, because I have asked you this before, I just asked you this a couple weeks ago, and I think it'd be interesting to get more of the opinion on that now that CitizenCon has come and gone. How does your community react to what you've been seeing and sharing from this now?
Really positively, like mostly just interested. because I did a summary on the whole 12-hour-ish of CitizenCon info, and that's doing really well. People are like, "Oh, thank you for putting this all together in a place where I can consume it over a much shorter period of time rather than having to like get into the weeds with these things." So there's a lot of people that have been really interested and just looking at all the gameplay and the engine tech and be like, dang, this looks really cool. Like the server meshing thing too, I think is what a lot of my fans who are kind of older now and more impressed by like next gen tech were gravitating towards, because they're seeing the implications of server meshing in any game, right? Not just Star Citizen, but they're like, well, what if you did this in Battlefield or PlanetSide or Call of Duty or any of these other massive games? Like, yeah, this tech is like could change the foundation of what they can do. And I've been saying this for years. I think mega games are the future, because they have tried server meshing with other game engine platforms and stuff.
Right.
And
That's
I
what
think
confuses me, because people are always like, "Oh, this has been done before."
not at the same scale or fidelity. There have been some platforms that have enabled server meshing, and I think there's that weird like extraction game. I forgot who it was by. It failed already, but
Scavengers.
Scavengers. I think
Yeah.
they used some of
It's on
that tech for the AI.
Spatial OS.
Spatial OS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're doing some of that, or I think it was breaking up the AI load onto servers so they could hit you with like hundreds of AI and you could still handle it somehow. So similar type of tech. I just think CIG is taking that to like a degree that not even Spatial OS has been able to like handle.
Mm.
So yeah, first time at this fidelity, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part's really turned a lot of heads and has been just so exciting to see the proof of concept and everything. And then of course the Squadron 42 gameplay trailer of just like this fleet shots and stuff. People are like, hey, what the heck? This looks like Battlestar Galactica, man. Like I want to play that game.
Yeah. So are they, do you notice if there are more people who have literally never heard about this kind of stuff, or people who kind of follow you and know you follow Star Citizen but don't want to hear about it, and now they're kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, which is my fans know about Star Citizen. I've been talking about it for like 10 years basically on the channel, whether it's not as frequently, just at the big update moments. Now it's been more frequently. So they've all heard it a lot. And, when the Spirit came out and the 3.20 patch came out, I made a video on it and people were like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't like super successful. I thought it was neat tech, but it's not as big information, not as exciting. But now that CitizenCon happened, all of a sudden, way more people are tuning in. They're going, whoa, why is everybody talking about Star Citizen all of a sudden? Why am I seeing big content creators dropping Star Citizen as a name in Squadron 42? So people are tuning in. They're going, oh, this has got some credibility now. Like something's happening. So yeah, I think my fan base is sort of doing the same thing.
Good times, man. I do hope that this sticks. I mean, looking at the different reactions from these people, and there's a lot of excitement in the air because of CitizenCon. Things are good, things are positive, but I'm wondering how this is going to look in a month or 2 months or in 6 months, when the takes kind of start to creep back in that maybe they were just showing that to keep us off for a little while longer, kind of stuff. So we'll see how it goes long term, but it is interesting to see how much people are interested in learning more about it, at least now.
Yeah, I think it'll do the natural thing, which is if there's any sort of content drought or information drought, people start getting salty and sort of, what's going on over there. But as long as they release a good product at the end of the day, and hopefully the end of the day is no longer than 2 years away, then it doesn't really matter. If you launch a great game, then the people who are never interested in Star Citizen and never put any money towards it get the opportunity to buy a fantastic game and have some fun with it, then it's great for basically everybody. It's great for the backers. It's great for the new players.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I lied on that last one. This is my last question for sure.
No worries, dude.
I know you said you prefer the PU more, but what does Squadron 42 as a game kind of mean to you? Where does it sit for you?
I normally don't like single player games because game writing tends to be absolute trash. Game writing is all like really trashy TV show writing, where like there's good TV shows and then there's trashy TV shows. I don't know why most video games are like, let's do the trashy dialogue for everything. You're like, can we have an adult game? Can we have people
Oh man, that got
interact
me with
with each other?
Cyberpunk sometimes. I just really,
The
it also got me with Starfield a little bit.
the campy or realistic side. Where do
The
you?
the more, I guess the like being just talking in a way that I really, it's kind of jarring. You don't expect it at that time.
Yeah,
You're like,
the
okay.
latest Cyberpunk DLC. I don't know if you played it, but
Mm-mm.
really good in my opinion. Like the characters feel real. They look. Idris Elba looks over at you, and you're like, "Are you my friend, buddy? Like, are we going on a mission together?" But then, like Starfield, they got that dead eye look in their face, and then they have all the actors have like 50 different dialogue trees that they have to cover. So each one is very bland and mundane, where they're like, "Oh, the other day, me and my daughter were going," and you're like, "What is this? Where did this come from?" It feels so unnatural and like, yeah. So, but coming back to Star Squadron 42,
Hmm.
even from the vertical slice back in 2017, I could tell that the dialogue was good, that the character creation was good. Like Chris has a background in this. He cares about it. This universe means a lot to him. So there's a huge amount of depth to it. And they were taking a serious tone with it, where the persistent universe might have some of the goofy commercials and sort of the salesman like characters that pop up and try and sell you a ship. And they can have a little fun with it. Overall, it's supposed to be a more serious game. But Squadron 42 is like, no, no, no. This is military service and sacrifice, and everybody's relying on us to get the job done. It's serious from start to go, and it's not the Call of Duty serious, which is like, let's get 4 Jason Stathams in a room to like one up each other and just alpha male your way through a campaign. This looks like a real thing. It feels cool. It feels like a movie that I'd want to watch,
Yeah.
right? And it's got that Battlestar Galactica vibe, which I love. Battlestar, which is again a serious show about people fighting for their lives, and it felt like it had that. So Squadron actually interests me, which is a very rare thing for me to say about a single player game, because I tend to not really like single players for the reasons that I just mentioned. But this one looks like it's breaking the mold on that regard. Gameplay, I'm still not totally sold on, but that's just because I haven't played it, and what they've shown hasn't been like over the top amazing. But narrative wise, writing wise, acting wise, that stuff looks incredible, and the story is something that I want to know more about. So I'm very much engaged from that perspective and excited to play it from that reason alone. Even if the gameplay is kind of mediocre, I think I'm going to enjoy it for the narrative elements, because it looks really top quality.
It's definitely, I can't lie. My excitement for it went up after this weekend. I mean,
Yeah.
like you, I saw the vertical slice before and realized like, okay, I'll be interested in this. This is the story I want to follow. It seems like the characters are good and the direction is decent enough. But after this weekend, man, that's different. Like now I know that sure the writing might not be great, but like the multi-tool is going to feel like an actual tractor beam. I'll have like proper physical interactions with things in there. I'm going to be pressing buttons. I'm going to be flying a ship that has a full HUD. Like I'm much more excited for a polished Squadron 42 than I ever was before because of that showcase. So it's
Yeah.
looking better for sure.
And the lore, it's a fantastic introductory to the lore of the universe, because the PU does nothing for the lore, really. You got to go on the
Yeah.
websites and look up the lore and watch, what's his Paul
Astropub,
Astropub's
yeah.
deep lore dives, and some of your deep lore dives on like what's happening in the Star Citizen universe. And you're like, I shouldn't have to do that to be able to learn about the universe,
Yeah.
So Squadron 42 is going to set the stage, and then I feel like the PU could really carry that further, or Squadron 42 part 2 and part 3.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
That'll be an interesting transition, huh? Once Squadron 42 ships, what's going to happen with the dev team? Is CIG going to wait to see how successful Squadron 42 is before fully committing to doing part 2 and part 3? Or
I think they're gonna, because it was
Yeah.
gonna be one game. I'm pretty sure it wasn't until Aaron Roberts joined the project that they decided to split it out in 3. So
Yeah.
they've got the story they got to keep telling. But yeah, I think it's a good point, because people have been saying, everybody says, well, not everybody, people say, oh, they'll finish Squadron 42 and all those devs will come to the PU and work will speed up on the PU. And then the counter argument to that is, well, no, they're not going to do that. They're going to move on to the next game. And it's interesting that we're now hearing, unofficially, but from official sources, technically, that a lot of these people who were working on Squadron are indeed moving over to the PU 2 years before Squadron comes out, well before they're talking about the second game. So we can all make the predictions of how we think that they're going to move around or transition, but it's pretty clear that they've got their own plans, and they're obviously going to keep trying to work a lot of work into both games. I don't think the PU is ever going to take as much a secondary role as it did during the development of Squadron 42 Episode 1.
And I think part of the reason for that is the feature complete status, right? Because that's what you need to build the game, is you need all the features. You write out your game plan. Here's what the player is going to do. Okay, we have to design a system for them to EVA to this ship and then search around it and then loot stuff and then kill that guy over there and then go here. We need to build those features. Okay, the features are done. We don't need to rebuild those features necessarily for the second game. Maybe the second game has a cool new feature in it that we hadn't done before. Okay, we got to make that feature, but we don't have to redesign all the old features. We can use the same tech, So much smaller team, I feel, would be needed for part 2, right? So maybe you do get to keep all those devs over on the PU, building out the other core tech of the multiplayer verse.
Yeah. What'll be interesting is seeing if they decide to downsize or just move people around, because it's a big company.
Yeah. I'm very curious about what they plan to do, because as many people mentioned, that StarEngine video looked like it was a marketing video for StarEngine, not necessarily for Star Citizen. Like it is a good marketing video for Star Citizen, but they're like, look at what we can do. Now imagine this. Now imagine your game using our engine. And obviously, like there's tons of devs out there being like, oh my God, we could do X, Y, and Z, like we can make everything so much better. So I would be very curious if they don't try and take on a role like Epic with the Unreal Engine and be like, you go use our engine for free. We've built all these tools for you to take it, and we'll take a cut of the sales, like Unity and Unreal does. I'd be curious. I wouldn't be upset about it, because I want CIG to make money, because I know Chris is going to put that money back into Star Citizen and make it better. So if because they spent all this money building StarEngine, right?
Yeah.
It would be a tragedy to waste all of this amazing tech on 1 or 2 games.
It's so funny you say that, man, because at the same exact time, somebody's out there typing down a comment saying, man, look at all they've done. Look at all the money they spent, and they have nothing to show for it.
Oh, well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, because they have a lot to show for it. They literally just showed 12 hours of it,
They have they've built this amazing product, and it makes sense for them to capitalize on it. But at the same time, it'd be kind of worrying, that it might shift attention away from their actual games towards maintaining the engine for others and others' demands and stuff.
It's a fair concern. I think as long as Chris and or Aaron are involved in the projects pretty heavily, as long as Chris doesn't retire from CIG at some point down the road after both games are in a decent state, ultimately you want the company to be as stable as possible, right? So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. If Blizzard was only World of Warcraft, that would be kind of a dangerous position for them to be in, because then they would have to hope that it stays trendy forever. And if Star Citizen becomes a little bit less trendy over time, do you want them to be able to work less on the game? Or what if Chris is still in charge of the project, but they've been monetizing the hell out of StarEngine, and now he's like, well, we can put more money than maybe it would be financially inadvisable to risk this much on Star Citizen's future based on the current trends of gaming. But I'm going to do it because it's my baby, and the company's making tons of money selling the StarEngine. So we're going to put it back into it, especially as a backer. If we put all this money into funding this project, we should want CIG to make as much money as possible through other sources too, like selling the engine. If they've already done the work, make that money, because we believe that it's going to go back into Star Citizen ultimately at the end of the day, right? Whether it's fair. Towards improving the StarEngine, which will trickle down to Star Citizen eventually, right?
Put Turbulent on a new game. I mean, it's interesting that they've already been acquiring companies and doing all that kind of stuff. It's sort of,
Yeah.
it kind of little whispers of a possible future that you're talking about, where they are, you know, you've got 5 or 6 games now running on StarEngine. Maybe some of them are even related to Star Citizen. That's an interesting future.
Yeah. Well, also, I don't think what kind of hit me the other day is when they mentioned like 1,300 employees. Well, I mean, you look at like Unity and Epic, I think they're both around like 5,000 or something like that. Like CIG's getting to this giant company status right now.
Yeah.
And like they're in a position where they could be running this major game engine that all of a sudden everybody around the world wants to use. You know, it could just explode out of nowhere, which would be very exciting.
That would be crazy. It was always surprising to me when they were talking about expanding and building these new offices, these crazy new buildings, and hiring all these people. And I'm like, dang, they must really expect some good stuff from Squadron to be funding all this over the next couple of years. But who knows? Maybe the engine will help.
Yeah, if they can get it on console, man. I mean,
oh man, that'd be big.
That's
that'd
like
be big.
double or triple sales right there, you know.
All right, man. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. That's about all the time we have. We're going to do a little quick Q&A here right after this with our supporters in chat. So if you are a supporter and you want to see these, consider joining us for the live podcast. But for everyone else, this has been LevelCapGaming. Could you tell them where they might find your content?
Yeah, just Google me, LevelCapGaming, or look me up on YouTube, youtube.com/LevelCapGaming. I got all the Star Citizen and some other stuff on there too. Currently working on it'll probably be out when you watch this, but kind of overview of the new finals open beta, which is pretty cool.
Sounds
Recommend
good.
it.
That one sounded good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Google the name, Bing him, maybe, if you will. I'm sure he'll pop up somewhere in the results there. All right, guys. This has been the launch sequence. I always appreciate your company. I hope this has been a good podcast for you. Learn something new. And I will see you all next week. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.